Hey guys, welcome back to another Q&A. It is Thursday morning. Let's see, it's September 17th. It's probably, I don't know if this will go up today. I'll be gone most of today, but probably get this someone up tomorrow maybe, or by the weekend. So we will try to get through these questions here. There was a lot of them. Hopefully I can get through all of them. All right. Some of them I actually already answered, people, so that might cut us back. But first one, Metformin. When is it necessary to utilize dosing and times to take it? I wouldn't say that it's really necessary ever. It can definitely complement. What you're doing. It can be really utilized at any point. It's, based on its mechanisms, the fact that it's going to help increase insulin sensitivity. It's going to help lower hepatic glucose output, mainly. You're probably going to get the most benefit out of it in a couple situations, either off-season phase, a phase where you're in a surplus, you're trying to grow, you're more susceptible to becoming insulin resistant because you're eating in a surplus for a long period of time. Then, or in a resensitizing phase, where you're trying to regain sensitivity from the off-season or the surplus phase, right? So, but in which case you could pretty much just continue to use it the whole way through both of those situations. The only time you really probably wouldn't need it or wouldn't really benefit a whole lot is just later in like a contest prep or a really aggressive fat loss phase, just because you should already be insulin sensitive at the time. It shouldn't really need anything like that. Now, if stress is really high, you are going to have more hepatic glucose output because of cortisol being up, adrenaline being up, in which case you could benefit from it. So if you're a very high stress person when it comes to prep or the end of prep or whatever, or the end of fat loss phase, you could benefit from it in that regard, or you could try to correct the stress. But otherwise, pretty much all the time, really. Dosing's anywhere from, there's a lot of different dosings. Common dosing could be anywhere from like 500 clear up to 2,000 milligrams per day. Generally start on the lower end, depending on how much help you need, for one, and also make sure that doesn't cause too much GI upset. It will alter microbiome a little bit. It's not a negative thing necessarily. That's just what happens initially. So usually start around the 500 range once a day, or twice a day. I'll probably start with nighttime, and then with like your last meal perhaps, and then maybe add it to morning time and titrate up the dose as needed for your desired result, right? That's generally like your common dosing. You can use the regular or the sustained release if you do have some GI upset from it. Most people don't if they titrate up, but there are the extended release versions available as well. When, if not from the start, is the proper time to look at blood work for a lifestyle Gen Pop client? You're never gonna go wrong by looking at it, right? Now, there could be some things like the person's very new to this whole arena. They don't really necessarily understand the concept of getting lab work. They maybe are on a very tight budget, so they don't want to do it right off the bat. Now, if they don't show any type of, there's no concerns in types of metabolic issues or hormonal issues, or not in like an age bracket or something that they're looking at hormonal downregulation or anything, you could really start without it. If everything looks great and in the clear at the beginning, you could probably start without it if you absolutely had to. If they don't mind doing it and they have the budget, I'm gonna do it. But if it's a situation like that, you might be okay with it without it at the beginning. Now, if anything else pops up to where things don't seem right and they're not really responding the way that you want, and you see signs of any of these types of issues, whether it be metabolic, hormonal, or even digestive, perhaps, that you can't correct through the plan, maybe they have a liver or kidney issue. I mean, there can be a whole lot of things that you could see on lab work. Then I'm going to go ahead and get it done. I'm going to insist, or at least strongly suggest that we get it done, or they go to their doctor and get it done. So, I mean, ideally, we just always do it from the start. But are there times where you could get away without it? Sure, if you needed to, if it's a budget thing, so on and so forth. But, yeah, I think that kind of covers most of the common scenarios there. Are rest days essential? If a day is set as your rest day that week, but you feel you can train, should you train, or should you take the rest day? Man, that is it's a really broad question. I'm going to say in general, yeah, rest is necessary. I mean, you can't just train and never recover, right? Now, there's a difference between muscular recovery and a difference between recovery of your nervous system. And then there's also a difference between just barely scraping by and recovering enough to rebuild tissue to grow muscle, right? So, and then you have to take into consideration what the training is, what the environment is like outside of that in terms of stress and demand. And then also, how hard is the person training, right? It's pretty unlikely that anyone that's training very intensely is going to train 7 days a week and make progress for any decent amount of time. Genetically, there's some outlying people, but just as a vast majority of people, that's going to be next to impossible to do, just because recovery, or your actual demand and workload, is going to far outweigh recovery when we're tipping the scales, right? So I can't answer this question as to when you should rest. I don't know anything about your program or anything about your recovery capacity or tendencies or nervous system or any of that. But to ask if rest days are essential, I'm going to pretty much say almost always yes. Unless you were somebody that's training really low intensity and you're just doing some leisurely exercise every day, you could maybe get away with that if the rest of your life wasn't very stressful, right? But the kind of training that we're talking about, even people that don't train to failure necessarily, they're still going to need rest days if you want to progress, even if you're muscularly recovering, because that happens quickly, right? You have sufficient amount of protein in your diet, you're probably going to recover. Add all the extra supplementation that a lot of people take on top of it, and you're not going to have any problem recovering. But from the nervous system standpoint, that's a whole different ballgame. And that's where recovery lacks, and that's where most people kind of lose out on progression in the gym, because that's what dictates muscle contractions, energy, strength, all these things within a gym session. So yeah, definitely going to be essential in some way, shape, or form, just based on all the other factors to take into that overall recovery equation. All right. Assuming one is ready to blast and has been on 200 milligrams TRT for a while, would it be better to hit a hard blast straight out of the gate and max dosing, or slowly work your dosing up, like 200 milligrams of test deca and EQ each, up them 200 per week every week or two until 800 through a 20-week? Yeah, so you're saying titrate up or go straight to max dose. Well, first off, 200 milligrams is not TRT for just about anyone. Might be a few people out there that need that, but that's going to put you way over testosterone replacement therapy dosing. You probably need about half that, maybe 150 for some people, maybe 175 for very rarely, but it's extremely rare that I see someone that needs 200 milligrams if it's legitimately, the real thing for testosterone replacement. So that's kind of a side note, but I'm just saying that that's not TRT, most likely. Yeah, I mean, you could do it either way. You could definitely titrate up, and the way that may work is that you start out with that base dosing that you mentioned, and then as progression slows, now of course I'm talking about, we also need to be in the surplus and eating to support growth, but as progression slows, then you could titrate up more. You could go up a little bit more, okay, and work up that way. Does it have to be on a set weekly or not bi-weekly or every other week type of basis? Not necessarily, but you could do it that way. Obviously, if you go straight up to the top dose, you're getting a longer or just larger total exposure to those androgens over that period of whatever, 20 weeks or whatever you're looking at. And of course, that's going to give you a higher susceptibility to side effects and higher susceptibility to things internally that you may not want, right? Whether it be some cardiovascular side effects or whatever, it's just giving you a larger susceptibility to those things. So I guess my question is, or I guess my point would be, if you can progress on less and just go up as needed type of thing, you may still get really good results, but also have less total exposure, would be kind of the idea. But, if 20 weeks can be kind of long. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do it. I mean, you could do more than 20 weeks if doses are lower, but 20 weeks at max dose, whatever max dose might be, 800 milligrams each. That's 2,400 milligrams of androgens for 20 weeks. Yeah, there's people that do way more than that, but that's going to probably be relatively advanced for a lot of people. Probably not for the person asking this. Unless you don't have any type of side effects at all, and you're kind of an anomaly in that regard, that's probably way too much. You don't need that much. Just going to tell you that right now. Not my client. I'm not working with you, but I'm just telling you that that's probably not what you need, and you can probably progress on far less and have less of a negative outcome in the long term. So take all those little points into mind. You can make your decision from there. Okay. Uh-oh, this one was shuffled down the list here somewhere. Okay, I think this is the last one on this thread. What do you do if you can't get to the gym and are gaining weight? You probably need to eat less. I mean, that's just a caloric balance issue. Now, you can still provide some muscle stimulus with body weight workouts, get some bands at home, get like a set of light adjustable dumbbells, get a barbell, something, grab a bag of pet food, dog food, cat food at your house that weighs 40 pounds, do some squats. I mean, there's plenty of ways. Like, I had to transfer so many of my clients over to home workouts for such a long period of time during all the lockdown stuff. I mean, it's definitely not possible to do, but that would probably be a good base. At least that way, when you reduce calories to try to not gain more weight, that you are retaining muscle tissue and losing fat. I'm assuming you don't want to gain weight just based on the question, but yeah, that's a calorie balance thing. You may be eating the same way or even eating more, but now you took away the activity of going to the gym, so now your calorie balance shifted. Still eating the same, doing less activity, boom, surplus, bigger one than probably that you want, right? So that's, yeah, you just need to reduce calories. You're gonna have to adjust your calories to account for the fact that you are lacking activity a lot, or add more activity in, right? So Okay. We have a couple more, 3 more. If someone is showing signs of Graves' disease or Hashimoto's in blood work, how would you approach dieting going forward, or would you change supplementation during a prep? If they're legitimately showing signs of Graves or Hashimoto's, and that their antibodies in the lab work are going up through the roof, I probably wouldn't have them prep. I'm just saying, I mean, a lot of autoimmune issues are inflammatory driven, stress driven. You're just asking for problems. I mean, something like this, if you caught it early and you saw the antibodies starting, especially like your TPO, TPI, things like that starting to rise, and you maybe saw your TSH, sorry, my dishwashers make all kinds of noise. I'm not in the office this morning, but if you saw your TPO, TPI, those, you see these antibodies going up, and you also see TSH getting up. And we lost our camera. We will continue. But as I said, if you see these antibodies moving and you see your TSH moving, usually going up, and you maybe see reverse T3 going up, if there's a conversion issue or whatever it is, I personally, I probably wouldn't continue to prep, to be completely honest. Now, if I just saw a rise in TSH and I saw a rise in RT3, reverse T3, for example, that's showing me stress, so lack of conversion from T4 to T3, that's normal for that's normal for being in a calorie deficit. That's normal for being in a prep. All that stuff is normal part of the downregulation process, and it's going to happen to most people to some extent. But an autoimmune issue is a whole different story, and we're talking about damaging your actual thyroid gland, it being attacked, right? So I wouldn't mess with that. I don't think that that's worth it. I mean, if you were like right at the end of prep or something, maybe, and you could, it's probably just going to be a matter of adding in thyroid medication to correct the values and get you back in range. But no, I probably wouldn't continue. I mean, because it's a bigger issue than that. It's more so that stress and inflammation needs to come down, and you need to be out of that stressful environment to hurry up and try to correct that issue before it gets too far along. All right, how to deal with joint, tendon, ligament pain or injury apart from exercise selection. Apart from exercise selection. Well, pain and injury are two different things. If we're talking about injury, that's a whole different topic. Go back and listen to the injury podcast. We just did some of those. Injury is a different, we're talking about like tears, ruptures, things like that. Pain may be an issue with an imbalance somewhere. You may have imbalances that need addressed through exercise selection, like you said, or you have areas that are tight. You may need massage or chiropractic or things like that. Generally, pain in a joint, unless it's derived from an overuse issue, so like an arthritis, right? Unless it's something like that's derived from an overuse issue that's just purely inflammation driven from doing something repetitively, there's normally an imbalance somewhere. Something hurts because something else is not doing what it should be, right? Whether it's a muscle not firing, or it's a postural issue, or it's an imbalance. You have shoulder pain because your upper back's very weak, your posture's bad, whatever. There's a whole slew of things. I mean, I would personally be going to probably a good massage therapist that can address or at least figure out where the tightness is at, and then not only correct it, but then you can see where it's at and you can see how you need to address it via exercise. Also, potentially going to someone that's a specialist in, motion and movement specialist. that can go through and do like CARs, C-A-R. That's a great way to go through and do joint therapy. Make sure your joints are moving. You have capsule stretches, they call them. So things like capsule stretches can be good as well. But figure out like, why is this area causing? Now, if your whole body hurts and all your joints are hurting in your entire body, then you have an inflammation issue. You probably need to stop. You need to train less, right? I mean, or you probably need to train less, lower your stress load in general, improve your diet, make sure it's not as inflammatory, supplement for anti-inflammatory, so that's, if you have multiple, like your joints all over your body are hurting, then that's a systemic issue. It's not like a acute issue, or it's not like a singular issue in one area because of an imbalance. You have total body inflammation at that point. So that's going to be addressed differently, like I said. All right, last one. We know the benefits of TRT at blast and cruise just as far as health reasons and resensitizing yourself to dosages. Well, resensitizing is kind of not really true, but anywho, it's not healthy to run 750 milligrams a test, nor will continue to make gains if you just ride that out for long periods of time. But is there any benefit in dropping GH dosage and up and down, obviously assuming your fasted BG levels are okay? I won't touch on the androgen part, but there's the reason you wouldn't want to run over physiological range is because there's side effects, right? There's long-term side effects to that. Side effects that you can't see happening normally, even in your labs. Anywho, GH, yes and no, not really, but if your blood levels are, but I got to look at like what benefit are you going for? Are you, in a fat loss situation, for example, you're really only going to get so much benefit from it other than just putting more water on you and making you maybe a little fuller. But even the literature research shows that it's the dose that you need for maximal free fatty acid mobilization. It's pretty small. I mean, we could say 2 IUs is probably about max. For most people, it can go up and down based on size, gender perhaps, but it's not very much. And you need to be in a fasted state, a baseline insulin state, for that to really occur. And then you need to wait long enough for the fatty acids to release, and then you need to do some type of non-glucose intensive activity to burn them off, aka take in the morning, wait, do fasted cardio, so on and so forth. So I mean, how many times a day can you really replicate that? Not really very much, because you eat all day. So naturally, it should probably kind of decrease on its own when you go into a fat loss phase, right? And that will give your pancreas a little bit of a break there from the blood sugar increases and everything as well. But no, I don't think that you would need to like cycle it, if that's what you mean, like in a situation where you're doing a really long surplus, if you need to like cycle it up and down. No, but it's going to cycle itself, like I said, if you know how to use it properly between the two situations. It's going to probably go down in the fat loss situation anyhow. You're really not going to get that much or any benefit from slamming tons of it anyhow. Not any more like free fatty acid release or anything, and you're not growing muscle at that point. So yeah, like I said, it just kind of cycles itself, really, or blasts and cruises itself, I guess you could say. So yeah, and for that too, if you wanted, on the OPD podcast, we have done episodes on that, I believe, for muscle growth, for fat loss, for kind of like application guides. So should be on there, pretty sure. If you just go to my bio, you can look for the OPD podcast, and there's a search feature on there for episodes. Cool. that's it for this time, guys. Thank you for all the questions, and we'll talk to you next time.